Millionaire loses everything, and only the maid had the courage to feed his baby. Ethan Walker pressed his forehead against the floor-to-ceiling glass, staring down at the city of Miami stretching out below. The late afternoon sky had turned gray, the distant ocean blurred behind a veil of humid mist. The condo towers along the bay were still glowing with lights, white yachts resting motionless in the harbor. Everything looked peaceful, almost unbearably so. In his hands was a thick stack of documents bound in a dark blue leather folder. The top letter bore a bold heading, Notice of Asset Seizure, United States Federal Court. He had read it 3 times. Each time the words seemed sharper, like hammer blows striking the lid of a coffin. Ethan, the banks have seized everything. The entire Brickell Bay complex, the South Beach Hotel, the Orlando project, even this penthouse. Nothing is under your name anymore. Ties, the voice of Mark Harrison, his lawyer for more than 10 years, still echoed in his head. Mark had been sitting across from him at the walnut desk, flipping through documents, speaking in a tone so neutral it felt cold. The IRS is involved now. As of this moment, your estimated tax debt is $18 million. Ethan let out a hollow laugh. $18 million. At his peak, he had once signed a $4 million check just to renovate a bar with an ocean view. And if I can't pay? Ethan had asked, even though he already knew the answer. Then there will be criminal charges, tax evasion, investor fraud, federal offenses. You could face at least 10 years in prison. But you know I never touched the books, Mark. Tyler handled everything. You both signed the documents. Your signature is on the paperwork, not Tyler's, Mark shrugged. You can say you were deceived, but in court, you're the one held responsible. Ethan clenched the folder so tightly, his knuckles turned white. Tyler Morgan, his partner, his closest friend, the man who once toasted champagne with him on a New York rooftop, had vanished somewhere beyond the Bahamas with tens of millions in investor money. And Ethan, the man who once appeared on the cover of Real Estate King of Miami, was now treated like a criminal. You need a $50,000 retainer, Mark said flatly. Otherwise, I can't continue to represent you. 50,000, a figure that once meant a single night's tip in Vegas. Now Ethan didn't even have 5,000 in his personal account. He remembered Mark standing up, adjusting his midnight blue silk tie, the Christmas gift Ethan had given him 2 years earlier, then calmly walking toward the door. This is business, Ethan. You're the one who taught me that. No money, no service. I'll send you a list of public defenders if you'd like. The door closed. The soft click sounded like a verdict. A shrill cry suddenly cut through his thoughts. Ethan flinched and turned around. The crying was coming from the room across the hallway, the room he had turned into a nursery for Lily, his 10-month-old daughter. He checked the time. Almost 7 in the evening. The nanny had quit the month before, when Ethan could no longer afford to pay over $3,000 a month. Since then, he had been struggling alone with Lily amid a storm of phone calls, emails, court notices, and furious investors. The crying rose again, more urgent, more panicked. Ethan hurried down the hallway and pushed the door open. Lily was standing inside her crib, her face flushed red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her tiny hands clung desperately to the wooden bars. Hey, sweetheart, Daddy's here," he murmured as he lifted her up, feeling the small, feverish warmth of her body against his chest. She whimpered, then burst into sobs again, burying her face into his shoulder, searching for comfort. "Are you hungry?" Ethan whispered. The question came out, but his mind was blank. When was the last time he had made her a bottle? This morning? Yesterday? The last few days blurred together into a haze, smothered by the smell of paperwork, anxious sweat, and cheap whiskey. The can of formula on the shelf was empty. On the shelf beside it, only 2 diapers remained. Ethan carried Lily back into his office and laid her on the large sofa, surrounding her with cushions so she wouldn't fall. He opened his wallet. 2 crumpled $10 bills, 1 $5, a handful of loose coins. $45. That was all the cash he had left. "Damn it," he whispered. A soft knock sounded at the door. Ethan froze. His mind instantly filled with images of court officers in gray suits, asset collectors, or worse, reporters. For days, his phone had been vibrating nonstop with calls from the press. He had turned it off. The knock came again, gentle but persistent. "Mr. Walker?" A woman's voice called out, soft, slightly hoarse, but clear. "It's Maria, from housekeeping." Maria. He let out a slow breath, still cautious, and moved toward the door. He unlocked it and opened it just a crack. Maria Rodriguez stood there in the blue uniform of the housekeeping staff. She was nearly 30, her black hair tied low, sun-touched skin, and bright brown eyes. In her hands were 2 large paper grocery bags from the cheap supermarket downstairs. "I'm sorry if I'm bothering you," she said, this time in slow, hesitant English. "I heard the baby crying from the hallway. She lifted the bag slightly. "I brought some things." Ethan frowned. "Things?" "Formula, diapers, some baby food, and a few groceries." She shrugged, her voice growing softer. "I know. The past few weeks have been difficult." His face burned with shame. Maria, the woman who cleaned the gleaming hallways, who cleared away the trash from his lavish parties, now stood here bringing milk for his child. "I didn't ask anyone to do this," he said stiffly. "I know." Maria met his eyes without flinching. "But the baby doesn't know that. She's just hungry." Lily's crying rose again from the sofa. By instinct, Ethan turned his head. In that moment, Maria slipped past him, stepped into the living room, and set the bags on the table. She walked over to Lily and lifted her with a natural ease that made Ethan both envious and deeply grateful. "Hola, chiquita," she whispered, gently rocking her. Lily's cries faded almost instantly, only a few shaky sobs left in her chest. Maria pressed her cheek to the baby's and then looked up. "May I make her a bottle?" Ethan stood there, at a loss. The part of him that was used to commanding, to controlling everything, wanted to say, "No need, I can handle it. Jam." But his eyes drifted to the empty can of formula, to his drained wallet. The words stuck in his throat. "All right," he finally said. "Thank you." Maria smiled very faintly and went to the hot water dispenser. Her movements were quick and practiced. A moment later, she returned with a warm bottle. Ethan watched as Lily latched on, her eyes slowly closing, the soft, steady sound of her sucking filling the quiet room. The vast apartment fell silent, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner and the breathing of father and child. "You don't need to pay me for this," Maria said, as if anticipating his reaction. "I know you. Haven't paid us this month, but—" "I will pay you," Ethan cut in, his pride flaring. "It's just that—" "I'm not saying it to bring up money," Maria shook her head. "I'm saying it so you understand. I didn't do this to collect a debt or to get something from you. I did it because no one should be alone at a time like this, especially not a child." He fell silent. In that moment, he realized that in all these years, he had never really looked at her for more than 3 seconds. To him, Maria had only ever been a name on the payroll. "Why didn't you leave with the others?" Ethan asked quietly. "The housekeeping team all quit last week. I couldn't pay them anymore." Maria glanced down at her worn shoes, then back at him. "Because the others, they've already received enough. At least enough to support their families for a few months," she said slowly. "As for me," she gave a small, self-mocking smile. "I still haven't been paid for last month. So if I leave, I'll be missing both things, the money and the chance to do what I know is right." Ethan stared at her. He remembered the numbers on the payroll sheet. Maria Rodriguez, $10,400 per month, a figure he had once considered a simple operating expense. And now she was using that very money he couldn't even pay her, to buy milk for his daughter. "Aren't you afraid of being dragged into this mess?" he asked, his voice tightening. Maria gave a slight shrug. "I've lost everything once before, Mr. Walker, so I know what it feels like to fall. And I also know sometimes a hand reaching out at the right moment can save someone from making a terrible decision." Ethan turned his face away, afraid she might see the sting in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "Just call me Ethan," he said quietly. "Mr. Walker doesn't suit me anymore." Maria smiled, and for the first time the smile reached her eyes. "All right, Ethan." A while later, after Lily had fallen asleep, Maria sat at the end of the sofa, absently turning the old silver ring on her finger. "Do you have a plan for tomorrow yet?" she asked. "A plan?" Ethan let out a short laugh, almost like a cough. "Tomorrow my lawyer will officially drop the case. The bank will freeze my accounts. The court will set a hearing date. I suppose the plan is going to prison." "You still have $45, Maria said, with a calmness that was almost startling. "With $45, you can choose to buy whiskey, or you can buy food and diapers for Lily for a few days. That's also a plan." Ethan fell silent. A few years ago, if an employee had spoken to him like that, he would have called it insolence. Now, he could only find it faintly funny, because she was right. "You still have your knowledge, your experience." Maria leaned slightly closer to him. "Tyler took your money, the government took your assets, but no one can take what's inside your head." "What's inside my head is exactly what led me here," Ethan said bitterly. "No," Maria replied softly, yet without a trace of hesitation. "What brought you here was Tyler's greed and your blindness in trusting it. If you use that same intelligence now, not to build a penthouse, but to rebuild yourself, what then?" Ethan looked at her. This woman, this member of the housekeeping staff, had just said something wiser than anything he had heard from a financial advisor in the past 2 years. He rested his elbows on his knees and buried his face in his hands. "I have a meeting tomorrow," he whispered, "with Victor Chen." Maria startled slightly. "That hotel tycoon?" "Yes, his assistant called this morning, said Mr. Chen wants to speak to me in person, at Brickell Grand." Ethan lifted his head, his smile hollow. He must be enjoying watching me fall from the saddle. Maria fell quiet for a moment. "You're going to go, aren't you?" "Do I have another choice?" He shrugged. "If he offers to buy what's left of my corpse, I might have to consider it." Maria studied him for a long time, then said softly, "If you go, at least let me prepare you so you don't look like a man who has already given up." The next morning, Ethan stood in front of the bathroom mirror holding a disposable razor Maria had somehow managed to find. He spread the cheap shaving gel across his jaw and studied his reflection. Dark circles hollowed his eyes from sleepless nights. His hair was unkempt. Stubble covered his chin. The man in the mirror looked nothing like the CEO who had once graced the cover of Forbes. Maria knocked softly and peeked in, Lily in one arm. "I've laid your clothes on the bed," she said, pointing toward the bedroom. "A white shirt, gray trousers. I took them to the dry cleaner downstairs. They agreed to let you pay later." "Another person I owe," Ethan muttered. Maria shook her head. "You owe them money, yes, but they owe you the chance to believe that kindness still has value. Don't turn everything into a transaction, at least not right now." Ethan smiled faintly. He finished shaving and rinsed his face with cold water. The scent of the cheap soap reminded him of the motels he used to stay in at the start of his career, when he still drove himself across Florida to inspect empty lots. He slipped on the white shirt that smelled of detergent from the dry cleaners, knotted the gray tie Maria had chosen, then held Lily for a moment before leaving. She grabbed his tie and tugged at it, babbling meaningless little sounds. "I'll be back before afternoon," he told Maria, if things aren't as bad as I expect." "If they are bad," Maria replied gently, "you'll still come home. Lily needs you, and I can make spaghetti with canned tomato sauce. At the very least, we won't be hungry." Brickell Grand was as dazzling as ever when Ethan stepped into the lobby. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble, and receptionists in dark suits offered professional smiles. A few years earlier, he had fiercely competed with this very hotel for VIP clients. Now he walked through the lobby like a debtor. Victor's assistant, a thin man with narrow-framed glasses, led him through the corridor into a private elevator and pressed the button for the 45th floor. The meeting room on the rooftop was spacious, with glass walls overlooking the bay. Victor Chen sat at the far end of the table. He was in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair neatly combed, a perfectly tailored navy suit. An espresso cup sat in front of him, his phone placed face down on the table. "Ethan," Victor said without standing, "have a seat." Ethan pulled out a chair, forcing his hands not to tremble. He had negotiated with Victor many times before. They had always been polite, but beneath that courtesy lay a tension as tight as a steel wire. "I assume you know why I'm here," Ethan said. Victor smirked. "Because you no longer have many options." He slowly flipped through the file in front of him, scanning it. "Tyler Morgan has vanished. Half-finished projects, furious investors. The government wants to make an example of you, and the media—" He let out a soft chuckle. "The media loves stories like yours." Ethan tightened his grip on the chair, his whole body stiff. "I didn't come here to hear you repeat what the newspapers have already written," he said. "You had your assistant call me because there was an opportunity. I assume that's what you want to talk about?" Victor leaned back in his chair, folding his hands across his chest. "I can arrange to cover part of your debt," he said bluntly. "Not all of it, but enough to make the IRS look at you more favorably. I can put together a team of lawyers to work on turning your criminal charges into a civil settlement. If everything goes smoothly, you won't go to prison. You may be on probation under financial supervision, but you'll be free." "In exchange?" Ethan asked. He had been in business too long to believe in generosity. "In exchange," Victor said, "you work for me, 5 years, full-time. No other companies, no private projects, no side deals." He slid another folder across the table toward Ethan. "This is the contract. Title: Regional Director of Operations, Southeast. You will oversee the entire hotel operation of my system in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. You report directly to me. Salary: $120,000 a year. No bonuses for the first 3 years. After that, if you perform the way I believe you can, then we'll talk." Ethan opened the folder. The pages were dense with terms, conditions he knew all too well, this time from the employee's side of the table. "You want me to work for you at a salary that's 1/10 of what I used to pay my COO, Ethan said, half smiling, half in pain. "You're no longer Ethan Walker, King of Miami," Victor replied flatly. "You're a 42-year-old unemployed man, legally implicated with a small child. You should leave your old ego somewhere on Brickell Avenue." Ethan lifted his head, his eyes burning. "You're enjoying seeing me like this, aren't you?" he asked. Victor looked at him for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I'm more pleased to see Tyler fall. You're just collateral damage. But I'm a businessman, Ethan, and I see something in you that many people don't have. You understand this industry from the inside out, and now I can buy that intelligence at a much lower price." He shrugged. "It's a good deal, for both of us." Ethan stared at the contract. 5 years reporting to Victor, the man he had once sworn he would never allow to outmaneuver him in Florida. 5 years abandoning all personal ambition just to run someone else's hotels. He thought of Lily, of the empty apartment, the empty formula can, the few dollar bills in his wallet. He thought of Maria, sitting the night before, turning the old silver ring on her finger, saying in a firm but gentle voice, "Sometimes a hand reaching out at the right moment can save someone from a terrible decision." "What will I have after 5 years?" Ethan asked. "Besides staying out of prison?" "You'll have a cleaner record, some savings, and," Victor said, "depending on how you use those 5 years, possibly a partnership offer. Or at the very least, a chance to rebuild your name in a different way. But if you refuse, then you already know what awaits you." Ethan drew a long, deep breath. His ego screamed inside him, "Don't do it. You once built an empire with your own hands." But Lily's cries from the night before drowned everything out. He picked up the pen. His hand no longer trembled. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll sign." He signed each page. With every stroke of the pen, he felt as if a part of his past were being sealed away, not with fireworks, but with the heavy sound of ink on paper. When he finished, he set the pen down. Victor nodded and gathered the contract. "We start Monday," he said. "You'll report to my South Beach hotel, not through the VIP entrance, through the staff entrance at the back. I hate tardiness. 6 a.m. You'll meet the management team." Ethan stood up. As he reached the door, Victor called after him. "Ethan?" He turned back. "Don't get drunk tonight," Victor said. "You'll need a clear head to say goodbye to your daughter in a way that she won't remember having a drunken father." Ethan looked at him, unsure whether that was sincere advice or a calculated jab. But that night, when he stepped into the nearly empty penthouse, he threw the half-full bottle of whiskey into the trash. 2 weeks later, Ethan stood in the cramped kitchen of a third-floor apartment in Liberty City, a neighborhood he had previously known only through news reports about violence and poverty. The apartment had 2 small bedrooms and a living room that doubled as a kitchen. The wooden floor was peeling. The walls were stained with patches of old flaking paint. The box-style air conditioner rattled loudly like a small propeller plane. Maria stood on a chair, carefully pasting cloud-patterned wallpaper over a corner of the wall in Lily's room. Lily crawled around the floor, clutching an old stuffed rabbit Maria had bought at a thrift store for $2. "Not bad," Maria said, stepping back to look. "At least she doesn't have to stare at moldy walls every day." "Not bad for you," Ethan said, leaning against the doorframe with a tired smile. "For me, it's a phrase I never thought I'd use to describe where I live." Maria shot him a glance. "In Mexico, when I was about Lily's age, my house had a tin roof, mud walls, and leaks everywhere when it rained. Back then, a place like this would have been a palace to me." Ethan fell silent. He was beginning to realize that many things he considered a disaster were merely normal to others. He was learning to measure life with a different scale. They had moved out of the penthouse a week earlier when the bank officially seized it. A cheap moving company had helped them transport the few belongings they were allowed to take, a few boxes of clothes, Lily's crib, and a handful of personal items. The paintings, the expensive furniture, the large TV, those now belonged to the bank. Maria had moved out of her tiny room near the airport to live with the 2 of them. Ethan had offered to rent her a separate place, but she shook her head. "If I live far away, who will look after Lily when you work 12 hours a day?" she said. "We save on rent. You pay me my salary, but we live together. I have my own room, you and Lily have yours. It's better for everyone." Ethan couldn't argue. He simply went to the bank, withdrew the first paycheck Victor had transferred, divided it up, and handed Maria her weekly pay. She took it without refusing, but didn't even look at the amount. "I don't want to be your unpaid savior for the rest of my life, Ethan," she said. I want to be paid fairly for what I do. That's mutual respect. On the first morning in the new apartment, Ethan got up at 4:30 a.m. The shower only ran cold water, yet it felt more refreshing than soaking in the marble bathtub of the penthouse ever had. He put on his only neatly pressed white shirt, dark trousers, and the leather shoes he had polished himself the night before. In the kitchen, Maria was brewing coffee with a cheap machine, the smell of coffee filling the room. "Good luck," she said, setting a cracked ceramic mug in front of him. "Don't make your new boss hate you on the first day?" "I used to be a tougher boss than him, I'm sure," Ethan muttered. "If Victor survived the version of me from 3 years ago, I think I can survive him now." Maria smiled, a hint of worry flickering in her eyes. "No matter what," she said softly, "you're still the man Lily calls Dad. Don't forget that in any meeting room." He bent down and kissed Lily on the forehead while she was still asleep, her messy hair spread across the pillow. Then he left the apartment every morning, not with the posture of a powerful CEO anymore, but like an ordinary father going to work to support his child. And strangely enough, that feeling was more real than anything he had ever known. Time slipped by quietly. An entire year. A year of rushed mornings, late nights, and Lily growing little by little in moments he often didn't get to witness. Until one evening, Ethan came home earlier than usual. The apartment door was slightly ajar. He stepped inside and saw Lily standing on a small stool by the sink, both of her tiny hands covered in soap bubbles. Maria stood close behind her, holding firmly around her small waist so she wouldn't slip. "Daddy!" Lily shouted, dropping the plastic bowl and trying to jump off the stool. Ethan rushed forward and caught her in his arms. "Are you washing dishes?" he laughed, wiping the foam from her cheek. "I help, Mommy," Lily said, stressing the word help in her childish voice. Maria stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. She watched the two of them, her eyes shining. "You're home early," she said. "Victor let me leave early today," Ethan said, setting Lily down on the floor. The little girl immediately crawled off to grab her stuffed rabbit. He said, "Go home before you start thinking the hotel is your home again." Maria chuckled. That does sound like him. Ethan looked around the small kitchen. The refrigerator was covered with Lily's scribbled drawings and a few Polaroid photos. Lily at the beach, Maria holding Lily, the three of them smiling in front of the house. "A year ago, if anyone had told me I'd be happy in an apartment like this, I would have laughed in their face," Ethan said softly. "And now?" Maria asked. "Now I'm only afraid that one day—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I'm afraid of losing this more than any penthouse." Maria looked at him for a long time. In her eyes was something Ethan still didn't dare to name. One Friday afternoon, just as Ethan was about to leave the hotel, his phone vibrated. The incoming number was unfamiliar. New York. "Ethan Walker?" A woman's voice, cold and familiar. He had once heard that voice every morning, every night, in every late call. The voice that used to call him love, and the same voice that left him when he began to fall. "Claire?" Ethan asked. "Yes," Claire replied. "You finally picked up." His chest tightened, not from love, but from a flood of tangled memories. The beach wedding in the Bahamas, lavish parties, winters in Aspen, and the night she placed the separation papers on the table and said, "I will never sign up for prison with you." "I'm busy," Ethan said. "What do you want?" "I'm in Miami," Claire said casually. "At the Four Seasons. We need to talk." "I don't think we have much left to talk about," Ethan replied, using I instead of we. "It's a legal matter, Ethan," Claire emphasized. "The divorce, and Lily." His daughter's name cut like a knife. Ethan glanced at his watch. He knew if he didn't deal with this immediately, it would hang over everything like a dark cloud. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the cafe across from the marina." Claire walked into the cafe the next day wearing a designer white dress, oversized sunglasses covering half her face. She was still beautiful, beautiful in a carefully maintained way, with smooth skin and chestnut-colored hair. But behind the lenses there was a trace of tension in her eyes. "You look different," she said, removing her sunglasses and looking him up and down. "Less polished?" "That your polite way of saying I'm poorer now?" Ethan smirked. Claire shrugged. "It's just reality. I heard you're working for Victor Chen now. Funny, isn't it? From a big boss to an employee. Life really does come full circle." Ethan didn't take the bait. He sat up straight. "Claire, what do you want to talk about?" She opened her bag and pulled out a folder. "I want a divorce," she said. "I have a contract. My lawyer prepared everything. I'm not asking for any assets from you, because honestly, you don't have any. I just want a clean break." "And Lily?" Ethan asked, his voice darkening. Claire paused, as if weighing her words carefully to avoid being judged too harshly. "I don't want to be involved with the child," she finally said. "You know I never wanted kids. I agreed to have Lily for your sake, for your perfect family image. But all of that has collapsed now. I'm not attached to the role of being a mother. I want to live my own life." "Lily is not a project you can just detach from," Ethan said, his fingers tapping against the table. "I won't fight you for custody," Claire continued, as if she hadn't heard him. "I'll sign away my parental rights. I won't ask you for child support. You have nothing to support with anyway. I just want everything clean and legal. Gonzalo wants to marry me. I don't want legal complications." "Gonzalo?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "My fiancé," Claire replied. "A Spanish investor. He's stable, not reckless like you." There were so many things Ethan could have said. He could have mocked her. He could have cursed. He could have asked, "Did you ever love me?" But in the end, he said only one thing. "Do you want to see Lily one last time?" Ethan asked. Claire avoided his eyes. "No," she said softly. "It's better for both of us. She's still small. She'll forget me." Ethan felt something inside him break and, strangely, lighten at the same time. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll sign. But you need to understand this. When you walk out of here, you're not just leaving my life, you're leaving hers. And if one day you change your mind and come knocking, I won't let you back in easily." Claire frowned. "You always like to talk as if you're the one who holds the power." "No," Ethan shook his head. "This time, I'm not deciding for myself. I'm deciding for Lily. She deserves to be safe from people who see her as nothing more than ink on paper." Claire stood up and gathered her documents. "Suit yourself," she said coldly. "Just sign. My lawyer will contact you." Ethan watched her walk away, flawless hair, rigid posture. He had once thought losing Claire would mean losing everything. Now he realized he had lost her long ago, even before Tyler disappeared. That evening, Ethan sat at the small dining table, the divorce papers spread out in front of him. Lily was already asleep in her room. Maria was washing the dishes, the sound of plates clinking softly against each other. "You could sign it tomorrow," Maria said, drying her hands. "You don't have to do it tonight." "I've delayed this long enough," Ethan replied, picking up the pen. He signed the name Ethan James Walker on each page, every stroke firm and decisive. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "How do you feel?" Maria asked. "Lighter," he said honestly. "Sad, but lighter. No more illusions." Maria sat down across from him. The warm yellow light illuminated her face, revealing soft features Ethan had never truly noticed before. He looked at her for a long moment. His heart began to beat a little faster. "Maria," he said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you about me, about you, about us." Her body stiffened slightly. If it's about me needing to find another place because people have started talking. No, Ethan shook his head quickly. That's not it. I want you to stay here. I want you here, not just as Lily's caretaker or as the person who manages my schedule. He swallowed, feeling his hands tremble, something he hadn't even felt when signing the contract with Victor. I've realized that over the past year, every time I thought I was about to collapse, the voice that pulled me back was yours, he said, his voice low. You gave me advice no one else ever did. You cared for Lily like her mother. You saw the good in me when even I couldn't. And he took a deep breath. I love you, Maria. A heavy silence filled the room. Maria stared at him, her brown eyes widening. Her hand instinctively turned the old silver ring on her finger. Ethan, she began softly, you just got divorced. I'm your employee. I live in your house. All of this sounds very dangerous, he offered. Easy to misunderstand, she corrected. I was once the girl people thought was taking advantage, a gold digger, just because I dated a construction worker who made good money. When he died in a scaffolding collapse, people spread rumors that he died because of my bad luck, that I ran off with the insurance money. But the truth is, there was no insurance at all. I was left with nothing but my own two hands. Ethan felt his heart tighten as he listened. He had never heard the full story before. He only knew her husband had died on a construction site and that she had come to the U.S., clinging to the lowest-paying jobs to survive. I'm afraid of what people will say if I'm with you, Maria continued. I'm afraid of losing the little I've built, my dignity, my small measure of respect. I understand, Ethan said softly. I'm not asking you to answer me right now. I just don't want to keep pretending that I only see you as an employee or as the good person who saved me. I owe you this truth. Maria lowered her eyes to the table and stayed silent for a long time. Ethan heard the ticking of the wall clock, the sound of cars outside, Lily shifting in her sleep. Finally, Maria looked up. I love you too, she said, her voice trembling but every word clear. But I love you as you are now, not the old Ethan. I love the man who knows how to throw a bottle of whiskey into the trash, who knows how to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work for his daughter. A smile, both sad and warm, bloomed on her lips. And I love the way you look at Lily, as if she is the best thing you've ever done in your life. His eyes stung. She is, he said. But if we're going to be together, Maria continued, I want it to be a calm, deliberate choice, not the result of gratitude, and not because you're lonely in the middle of a crisis. I want us to build this slowly, the way you're rebuilding your life. We have 5 whole years on that contract with Victor. Ethan smiled faintly. Slow is fine. Maria laughed through shimmering tears. Then, let's try, she said, like a team, but if one day you forget who you truly are again, I'll be the first one to remind you. I hope you will, he whispered. Ethan reached across the table and took Maria's hand. She gently squeezed back. Amid the coffee stains and pen marks on the cheap wooden table, something new, fragile yet real, was quietly born. 2 years passed. Many things changed. Some things did not. Ethan's office was no longer in a basement next to the laundry room. Victor had transferred him to the headquarters in Brickell with the title Vice President of Operations. Southeast. His salary increased, bonuses appeared, stock options were mentioned. He bought a small pale yellow house in a quiet northern suburb of Miami, with a backyard large enough for Lily to run around in, to grow a few tomato plants, a few bougainvillea vines. One June afternoon, they sat on the back porch as a light breeze carried the distant scent of the sea. Lily had gone to bed early after a full day at her new preschool. Fireflies flickered in the bushes. Ethan held a thick envelope from New York in his hands. He opened it and reread the letter from the law firm, the final notice regarding Tyler's case. The Department of Justice had officially sentenced Tyler to 50 years in prison in absentia. Nearly all assets had been seized, leaving almost nothing behind. Ethan, thanks to his agreement with Victor and his full cooperation, was classified as a key witness and was not criminally prosecuted. He folded the letter and set it on the table. "It's over," he said. "Everything connected to Tyler, to Walker Group, the legal stuff, the paperwork, all of it." "How do you feel?" Maria asked, sitting beside him, her bare feet touching the wooden floor, her fingers turning the new ring, the ring he had used to propose 3 months earlier, simple, with a small stone. "Like—" Ethan looked out at the yard. "Like closing the door on an old house. It used to be home, even if it held a lot of bad memories. But now you lock it, drop the key, and walk toward a new home." Maria rested her head on his shoulder. "You built this new house with better wood," she said. "Not expensive walnut, but the kind made of time, patience, and honesty." "And you're the architect," Ethan smiled. "No," she laughed softly. "I'm just the one who reminds you not to smash holes in the walls." They were silent for a moment. Then Maria spoke. "Do you ever regret losing everything you once had?" Ethan thought. He remembered the yacht, the endless parties, $1,000 dinners, private flights. Then he remembered the nights Lily had a fever, Maria holding her on the sofa while he clumsily brewed ginger tea. He remembered the mornings he walked Lily to school, the way she wrapped her arms around his neck for a quick kiss before running into class. He remembered the times he and Maria argued over staff policies, only to laugh when they realized they both wanted the same good outcome. "Yes," he said honestly, "sometimes. I'm still human. But if I had to choose one of the two, I would still choose to lose all of that to gain this." He gestured around them, the small house, the backyard, the old car parked on the street, and Maria leaning against him. "And if I had to tell the Ethan from 3 years ago just one thing," he continued, "I'd say, you thought you were rich, but you were actually very poor, my friend." Maria burst out laughing. "If you said that, he'd punch you," she said. "Let him punch me. The person who deserved to be punched most in my life was that version of me." Maria fell quiet for a moment. "I think," she said slowly, "the greatest wealth you have is the ability to see that. Many people lose everything and still think the whole world is to blame." Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. Out on the horizon, the sun slowly sank, dyeing the sky and the ocean in shades of orange and gold, as if the world itself were raising a quiet toast to a kind of happiness that was simple yet enduring.